Welcome to the February Wednesday webinar. My name is Maria McDougall, and today we're going to do a deep dive into financial aid award letters and tips for comparing them. If at any time you have a question, please use the question feature on your GoToWebinar menu bar. All questions will be compiled and the answers sent to everyone after the webinar is concluded. We are also recording this, so I plan to send it out to you folks and those that are unable to attend today because of the weather. Okay, we're going to cover a lot of information, and if we're unable to get through all of it, I will make sure to send out the materials to those of you that didn't receive the PDF. We're going to start by discussing an overview of the financial aid process, how notification works, understanding the parts of award letters, and perhaps most importantly, tips for comparing them. I'm going to use a kind of a unique analogy. And then we'll cover other things to consider, what happens if the aid isn't enough, and leave you with some tips and helpful information. So this is kind of a flow chart of the process. So the student and at least one of their parents, if parent information is required, need to create the FSA ID. As I'm sure most of you know, that's the most headachy part of the process. So we do recommend that students and families do that in advance of doing the FAFSA, but that's kind of step one to get everything rolling. It's the username and password needed to electronically sign and submit the FAFSA, and is also used to access other federal student aid sites. To get the most out of the aid, the student should do the FAFSA as early as possible after October 1st. That's when it becomes available. If you have students who have not yet filed their FAFSA, even if they're not sure of their fall plans, have them file the FAFSA now so they can at least beat the state of Maine grant deadline of May 1. So there's still time, but we do want to make sure that they're not missing any deadlines. Then part of that process is listing schools on the FAFSA. That's at least one institution where the student wants to receive financial aid. So schools are listed on there. And then after the FAFSA is sent, the student will receive their student aid report, and that will actually show the schools that are listed, as well as a line-by-line summary of the FAFSA and what the expected family contribution is. And that's actually the number that the financial aid office and the federal government will use to determine financial aid. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more a little later. Once a student is accepted to the university, so while this is going on, they're doing their admissions applications, they'll receive an award letter. So a student has to be accepted to an institution before they will receive an award. The first is often paper, but not always. Again, we're going to talk about that in some more detail. Students should compare award letters, and it goes a little bit back and forth. So the student starts the process, the school accepts them and sends the award. Then the student and family have work to do again. So they're going to compare against net price. I'm going to give you some tips for how to do that. Once the student has made a determination, they go in and accept the financial aid offer. There are some things that have additional steps, things like that. And then it kind of goes back to the school. So the school will process the financial aid, assuming they have all the materials they need. So while this is going on, students should check email, those kinds of things. Making sure that all documentation is received. And then the school will process the financial aid and it will show up on the bill. Usually it's pending. There's generally a window of time. Aid can't disperse like 10 days before the first day of classes is the earliest the aid can actually be applied to the bill. So generally when you see that, it shows up as pending, and I'll show you an example of the bill toward the end of the presentation. But that's kind of the financial aid flow, and I think it's important to understand that as we're talking about award letters, so you can see where it lands in the process. I'm going to start by talking about things that are pretty typical on financial aid offers, so things that are standard, kind of what to expect initially. So what is an award letter? It's an electronic or paper document from the financial aid office that provides a breakdown of the offer of financial aid. We do say offer because the student has to indicate that they want the financial aid, and because certain types such as loans and work study require additional steps and paperwork. It will show financial aid by type, amount, and source, and is usually listed by semester and then year. So it is most often broken down. How is this generated? It's cost of attendance minus EFC equals need. So I'm going to go over that calculation kind of a little bit. So the cost of attendance is total direct costs. So that's things that show up on a bill: tuition, fees, room and board, that sort of thing. And indirect cost, things like bills, travel expenses, miscellaneous, all of that. They take that and they subtract out the expected family contribution, which is the amount of money that the family could potentially contribute toward the education, and what's left is need. You may have heard of colleges talking about percentage of need met. That's what they're talking about. Award letters are usually a combination of federal, state, and institutional funds. Ooh, it's like automatically going here. 1 second. Let me back up for 1 second. There is often a gap between the financial aid offered and the net price. So we will talk about that in a little detail a little bit later. So how and when will it arrive? Usually mid-February, early March for new students, later in the spring for returning students. Again, that's assuming the FAFSA is received on time and they've done all their admissions applications. First-time students usually receive a paper award letter through snail mail, and then all others are electronic moving forward. Students should be sure to activate their university email address and student portal. Even first-time students who receive paper award letters will have action to take online in the school's portal. So if the student plans to receive award letters from multiple schools, they should activate the student email and portal for all of their schools. And just a little pro tip, juggling all that email can be tricky. I know I have a work email and a personal email, and it's hard to keep up with just those two. So it's a good idea to set up the email addresses from the schools to forward to the student's personal email address. So, you know, at least while they're in the award letter comparison process, they're not missing anything. And then get into the habit of checking it regularly. So really checking that student portal, checking the email is really going to avoid the student missing anything that is important. So that's kind of the how and the when. So here's my little analogy. Award letters are like apples and apricots, right? They're both round fruits, but they're different. They taste different. They look a little different. So we're going to kind of examine some differences in award letters because I think across the board, they're all different. So even amongst all of the University of Maine system campuses and the Maine Community College system, each institution has its own kind of layout and format for this, which I know can feel a little bit confusing. So I just want to show you examples of some that we have edited from real life examples, just to show you some of the differences and things to look for. Okay, so this example, do I want to go back one? No, this is good. Okay. Has a couple of features on it, so we're going to go through like what that looks like. So this one does show the cost of attendance. You'll see up in the corner there. It shows the tuition, fees, miscellaneous, transportation, so both the direct and indirect costs. It shows the gift aid, so you'll see that kind of it's broken out there in the middle. With the Pell Grant and the State of Maine Grant and the Quidditch Scholarship. So here we're looking at Gryffindor College Office of Financial Aid. For my Harry Potter fans out there, you'll see that. And then it has scholarship, like the loans after that. So usually it's kind of set up with the grants and scholarships first, and then what we call self-help aid, which is loans funded by the federal government and or the school. That's generally the setup of these. But again, it's important to know that there's kind of two types of aid: the the grants and scholarships. If there were tuition waivers or housing things, anything that's kind of free money, generally listed first, and then the self-help is listed after. So here is another example. This is Erudite College for my Allegiant Divergent fans here. Again, it looks a little bit different. So this one is a little bit more text-based. You'll notice there's no cost of attendance listed. It does have right in that first paragraph talking about that based on what they answered on the FAFSA about their housing plans, that they're going to live on campus, that they're going to be a full-time student in the nursing program. Make sure to have students and families read award letters carefully to make sure that this is accurate. So if something has changed, they're going to be half-time or they're not going to live on campus. Those are things to look for. It does say at the bottom here, draw a line through anything you want to decline. So it's a little bit, they've given you instructions of what to do. This is what you need. And then you'll see the breakdown there. So you'll notice again that you've got Pell, Main State Grant, college grant, and work study kind of listed first, and then the loans and things after. I do want to point out here, you'll see that the work study, the other one didn't have the work study on it, is kind of lumped in with the whole financial aid package. But work study funds do not show up on the bill. So they show up on the award letter as part of the financial aid package, but they aren't funds that are used to pay the bill. And award letters are not great at making that clear because, again, you'll see that this one is kind of right in the middle of the financial aid offer. So we always like to point that out so that families know that work study is definitely part of the financial aid package and is a great opportunity for students to work on campus, but is not going to help you with that bottom line. So I just want to point that out, that in general, you'll see it kind of in the middle, but it's not part of what you'll subtract to figure out the bottom line. And then here's our Hunger Games themed Capital University award letter. This one this is an orange, right? This is not an apple or an apricot. This is quite different in terms of the layout, the information. Seems like there's a lot going on here, but it definitely has a lot more information. So you'll see it started with the cost of attendance. It talks about, it lists the EFC right there so families know, okay, this is what kind of things we're based on. There's little footnotes for things listed on there, such as, the on-campus housing grant would only apply if the student was living in the residence hall. It does mention that there are other, potential funding sources to help you pay for the bill. It's really broken up. Grants and scholarships, no repayment needed, makes it clear. Loan options to be repaid back by borrower. Work options. So this is one example where work study is actually clearly separated out to indicate that it's not part of the bottom line calculation. So that part I really like. And then, the footnote of if no amount appears, you're not eligible, but, contact us for our on-campus jobs or wait list. This one really has a lot of in-depth information on it, including contacting the financial aid office. And my other thing that I think is really great about this is it has some endowed scholarship information on there, and it does indicate, excuse me, that there's a luncheon available to say thank you to the donors. And that's just a cool opportunity for networking and for the student to say thank you. So even in a customizable award letter situation like this, when you see these, you're going to be able to see that there's a lot of information showing pretty quickly. So it breaks it out. Little arrows here. So we have these 3 different award letters. How do you know which offer is best? I think we know which layout maybe looks the friendliest and which, communication methods we prefer, but you can't really look at an award letter and know exactly what the best offer is for the family. So I want to kind of look at some tools that will help you compare. My philosophy is always find an option that works best for you. That's just I had a mom come in once to the financial aid office where I was working, and she had this gigantic 3-ring binder of award letters and all the college paperwork, and she had done it kind of by hand, almost like a scrapbook, and it was quite impressive. And I think she had used Excel for some of it. Whatever method for comparing them works for you is fine. We just want families to really sit down and look at them and make the informed decision. So we have created a tool that's comparing award letters worksheet. So we do have them able to print on the website blank like this. They are also fillable PDF on our website, and it does the math for you. I'm going to show you what that looks like in the next slide. But that's like handy because it does the calculation for you. And we've kind of laid out where to put everything. Excuse me, there are other tools available. So I know College Board has one. There's, sometimes apps and things like that. You can go old school and use Excel, whatever's going to make sense for you, but line them up, put them side by side to compare. And just a quick note, again, you'll notice on our worksheet, even if the award letter itself doesn't separate out work study, we've put it at the bottom of the sheet. Just as a reminder, this is not something that's going to be part of your calculation. So what we did here was we took those 3 award letters that we just looked at and we filled out the sheet to line them up. So we're going to look kind of closely at how the math worked out. So we did this one in the fillable one on our website, which is cool because it does the math. So you can see that the costs before loans might be surprising. The direct costs of the erudite one were $60,000, but after the large grants and scholarships, the net price before loans is $11,330. So the net price for Capital University, which costs $26,325, is actually a little bit more. So we've talked about in financial aid nights and things like that, your sticker price versus your net price. So any cost information you see on a school's website is your sticker price. Almost no one pays that amount. We want families to focus on net price. So as you're doing your college research, we're hoping you're utilizing the net price calculator tool that's on websites. So we ask families on this to sort of look at those direct costs, the tuition and fees, the room and board. What are those actual direct costs? Fill that in, and that's going to give you that net price. And then we assume that all students are going to take those grants and scholarships. That's the free money. So the net cost before loans is quite different once you start figuring out what the aid is. So a college like erudite, which you maybe thought was more expensive, could actually be less expensive. So again, it's not necessarily that you should write off a big sticker price school like that because they may have more funds to give out. So that's an important thing to remember. So you'll notice there that what the costs are, what the difference is. Just by looking at that line, you might say, okay, that's kind of affordable. If the sticker price is, still too high and you take the housing costs out, you may find that you are able to make it work, right? So you'll put in the loans, what the total loan amount is, and then you've got your estimated total cost there at the bottom. So you could probably afford a college like Gryffindor almost with nothing out of pocket for the cost of just what the loans and financial aid are if that student lived at home from Gryffindor. So just keep that in mind. This will literally put all the numbers right in front of you, which I think is really important to do. Look at the math together, side by side, compare them, because I think you might find some differences. So now that you've compared awards, right, you kind of said, okay, here's what works best for us. We're going to attend this university because it makes the most financial sense. What are some of those other things that you need to consider? Because there's a lot of things that might not necessarily occur to a family right off the bat. So is any of the aid renewable? So some may not be, some may differ in subsequent years. So for example, direct loan eligibility from the federal government actually increases as the student goes forward. If they have any merit scholarships, there's usually GPA requirements and things like that, so that they have to maintain certain criteria to keep it. Any private or outside scholarships, you want to find out, are they renewable? And also keep in mind that costs could increase each year. So, there's historical increases to consider. Generally, it's anywhere from 1% to 3%, although I think some colleges are doing well to try to freeze tuition rates. But imagine that you've got, okay, in future years, what is this going to look like? So take your bottom line, multiply by 2, 3, 4 years, whatever the total education is. That's going to give you a sense of what is the total cost of the education. I think that's a really important thing to consider. And scholarships. I want to spend a little bit of time on this for a number of reasons. We always, always, always encourage students to pursue outside scholarships. They can help reduce the net out-of-pocket price, and every dollar received in scholarships is one less dollar that needs to be borrowed. Sometimes if you received an early scholarship and reported it to admissions, they might show up on the award letter, so it would say the name of the scholarship, which brings me to kind of a common question. So people often want to know how getting an outside scholarship impacts the financial aid offered, because you are required to report that, and they're going to find out about it anyway once the funds actually come in. There's a myth out there that, if you get too much scholarship money, they take away financial aid. That's actually not true. In general, schools are going to reduce loan eligibility wherever possible. So they're going to apply it to any of the unmet need calculation. They're going to reduce loan eligibility or work study. So maybe the student's not going to utilize some of their work study. They're going to reduce that. They might swap institutional funds around. It's really never going to generate a bill to the school. There's always kind of an option for swapping funds out or reallocating. We would never, ever, ever say to a student, don't get as many scholarships as possible. More scholarships equals less loans. Ask questions as soon as you're notified. Find out from the scholarship agency if they're going to send funds directly to the school and when they're going to do that. So is it first semester, or do they want to see first semester grades? Is it renewable? I always say to encourage students and families to write a thank you note. It goes a long way, especially if it's something that is renewable or something that the student was nominated for. Gives them a good chance of getting that scholarship in the future. Okay, so I want to take a little bit to go over the bill, because we want to talk about the reason we're trying to figure out how to compare award letters is because we want to know what the bottom line is. So again, like the award letters, the bills also all look different. So in this lieu of standardization, there's a few things that you're going to see, and also they're going to look different in whatever the school's online portal is. So much like the award letters, generally a bill will come in the mail via paper the first time around, and then things will be in real time and live on the student's portal. The financial aid is going to generally show up as pending. So bills are usually arriving over the summer. They're due kind of before the fall starts. And you'll see, depending on what type of aid the student accepted and all of that, you may see some aid is pending because it won't have dispersed yet, but it should be clear that it will be applied to the tuition. So you'll see in the example on the screen, it's down at the bottom there, pending items are listed below. Just read everything carefully. Make sure to look for things like, what are the housing costs? So has there been a change in the housing? Make sure that you read all of the materials that come with the bill. So there's usually information about health insurance. Health insurance is required, so colleges blanket charge everyone for it. If students are covered under their parents' insurance, there's usually a process they can go through to waive that health insurance, usually just logging in and putting in the insurance card information. But if they forget to do that, then the student is charged for insurance that they don't need. So it's Very important to look at the bill closely. If there's fees and things you don't understand, certainly review that. And then once you've got your bill and financial aid pieces, then it's time to sort of create the plan of how you're going to pay for that. And some schools are actually including a worksheet with the first time bill that is required to be returned so that families can say, this is the plan for us paying the bill. On the back of the worksheet, so if you were to print out our cost and financial aid worksheet, you would see this calculating resources to pay the balance. Again, also exists fillable on our website. So what we did, well, I just plugged in Gryffindor because I said, okay, the student's going to go to Gryffindor College. We've got the total out-of-pocket cost, which was from the other side of the sheet. Okay, plugged that in. They got a $1,000 outside scholarship, and that leaves the remaining balance. Okay, so they have $4,330 to finance. So you'll see that the kind of piecemeal approach to paying the bill. So the student has about $150 in savings that they can pull from. So that leaves $4,180. Then there's, let's say, a 529, so next gen, that's $500 that they're going to use for the first year. Nothing else you'll see there we've indicated. So the remaining balance that out of pocket to pay is $3,680. So that could be a monthly payment plan, right? So most colleges offer some kind of monthly payment plan to finance some or all of the remaining balance. The student could apply some of their work study funds to the bill. So what we've done in there is that the student would have to make the arrangements with the student accounts office to do that. It's not automatically going to happen, but they could say, okay, I'm just going to take this and use it to pay towards my bill. There are other types of federal loans. So there are federal Parent Plus loans. That's a loan in the parent's name. There's also private loan options. So different things to put together based on what the family circumstances are. So it's a little from here, a little from there, to get the bill paid. So we hope that most families can find a way between all the different sources to fund that gap, because in general, most students and families, the financial aid itself is not enough to actually cover the full cost, especially if the student is living on campus. Reducing the bill is a great thing. So see if there can be a less expensive meal plan. Did they test in and out of certain classes? Taking AP classes is a great way to reduce tuition. Those kinds of things you want to look at. Again, not missing the health insurance, just being aware of what the costs are. Okay, so again, consider the entire cost, figure out the long-term plan of second year, third year, fourth year, and building the habit of scholarships is really going to help, because I think a lot of students' families are really good about it leading up to the first year, but there are scholarships available to upperclassmen as well. If it doesn't specifically say that it's for a certain type of student or a certain year in school, the student should apply for it. It's a great habit to get into. Again, considering, especially if there does need to be borrowing to help meet that bottom line, the student's going to want to consider, their entire cost of education versus what they're going to make in their chosen field. So careeronestop.org provides salary information on careers. It kind of talks about what the starting salary would look like based on location and field, and what kind of the top line is and what the median is. That's a really great tool to sort of start the baseline, because the rule of thumb is you don't want to borrow more money in total for your education than your salary. I think many folks have gotten into that situation, but if research ahead of time is really going to help with this. FAME has also we've got a student loan and salary calculator in the calculators and tools section of our website, which helps put borrowing into monthly numbers. So you can say, okay, if my debt is this, how many months is it going to take me to pay off? What does my salary need to be to manage this debt in a certain number of years? It's also important to remember that costs, again, increase each year, and living at home at a lower cost school can really save money. Room and board is across the board the most expensive part of the college process. Um, that's due to a lot of reasons. So if a student is able to commute, even with things like gas, it can make the education a bit more affordable. It's often actually less expensive to live off campus in an apartment with roommates than it is to live on campus. So those are all things to consider. Students sometimes are required to live on campus the first year, but then have the option to move off campus. Whatever works for that student, just bear in mind that it can sometimes be a great idea to live off campus to start with. Also, things like considering community college to start with. So maybe it's a 2-year program, especially if the student's not sure what they're going to do. They can attend a less expensive community college, get a credential there, and then transfer into a 4-year program. It's a great way to save some money, to get those core classes out of the way, and then really invest in the specialized part of the field in a 4-year school later. Those are all things you want to consider as part of the process. And it's easier to do that if you've done the math and seen the bottom line of the award letters. So in conclusion, remember that they're all going to look different. Apples and apricots, compare and contrast. There might be an award letter that has more line items, but based on cost is not actually the best deal. So it's really important to line them up, do the math, figure out, what the bottom line is, and then do a rough estimate of what the family can contribute to meet that bottom line. Payment plan, loans, all of that, really spell it out so that students and families can make the right decision. Again, focus on net price versus sticker price. So as students are doing the research and figuring things out, we want to make sure that we're encouraging them to use the net price calculator as the starting point there, which can lead to not ruling out an expensive school until you've determined the bottom line, because sometimes those expensive schools can give out more of the free money. We want always students to apply early. Deadlines are key. We want students to make sure that they've done the FAFSA ahead of their college's priority deadline by May 1st at the absolute latest, so that they would be eligible for state grant if they meet the requirements. But the earlier the better. That will maximize financial aid if they're doing the FAFSA on time. And then just encouraging scholarships. So we do have last month, I believe, our Wednesday webinar was on tips for scholarship searching. We want students to go to our website. We have a great scholarship search there. We really want to encourage them to do that work, get the free money, make sure that they have set themselves up as the habit of looking for scholarships throughout their education. One thing that's not on here that, again, I will reiterate is that there are, again, multiple email addresses that the student may need to check. Once they've made that determination, they should let the other colleges that they're not attending know that they're not going to go there. And then just really get into the habit of checking the email communications from the school, getting into the habit of logging into the portal and utilizing the tools that are there for students. Anything that changes, that the student portal is most often where you see things in real time as far as changes to the bill or changes to the award. So a student may receive an email that says something has been updated. Please log into the portal to view it. So encouraging students to be self-sufficient and get used to that portal is really going to help with that. Okay. So we do have a lot of information on our website. That's where you can find the worksheets for those kinds of things. The fillable versions are there. We do put scholarship information out on our Facebook page too. So I do encourage you to make sure that students and families are following that as well. We do have a YouTube channel where we've put out some animated videos. There is one that's I think about 7 minutes long on comparing on this very topic on award letters. So you could send that out to your students and families. It just is a little avatar talking about a lot of the things that were discussed in the webinar today. We also have one on the FSA ID, on filing the FAFSA. There's a whole grouping of them out there that students and families can use. We're always available by email and phone, and happy to come do award letter workshops with students and families. I'm just trying to get back to here. Checking for questions. All right, let me just review some of these real fast. Okay, so someone asked about some of the Finish in 4 programs. I'm going to follow up with you kind of in a separate email. And if people are hearing about some of those like pledge and promise programs, I certainly want you to be able to have information about those. So we're working on putting information about those products. I shouldn't say products, those programs. So there are a number of universities in the university main system that are offering like free tuition kinds of programs. So we can certainly answer questions about that. If nobody has any other questions, I will wrap it up for today. I hope that you're staying warm and that you are not having to travel too far today. It's supposed to get nice this afternoon. Thank you so much for attending the webinar. Have a great day.